This call is now being recorded.
Yeah, we just had a couple parties.
Okay, Chromebooks, all that, get that shut. Thank you. Okay. Hey, what did we go with?
Topo, like
To-
hobo.
Topo. Hobo.
Hobo. We're using our decoding skills. Those are going to be mine if you're playing with your scissors, sir.
Topo.
Topo. Not to be confused with the popo.
Topo. Okay.
Uh-oh. I see conversations. That makes me very sad. Okay, so our first chapter for today is Father Topo and Little Noosh.
There were voices in the dark.
Kabicha Laska, Kabicha Tiki.
Said one voice. It was a strange voice, small, fast, and high-pitched. A girl's
I
voice.
totally didn't say that correctly. Sorry, there we go.
Said one voice. It was a strange voice, small, fast, and high-pitched. A girl's voice, maybe.
Tahir, Tama Loska S Nuoska Noosh.
The second voice was slower and deeper, but still strange. It was almost like singing. Was he dead? Well, no, not quite. But nor was he alive. And if they had found him in Blitzen even just a minute later, then they would have found two dead bodies. The first thing Nicholas noticed was the warmth. It felt like a kind of warm syrup was filling him up from the inside. He did not yet feel the small hand pressed against his heart, but he could still hear the voices, even if they did sound a million miles away. Said the high-pitched voice, which now, even more weirdly, Nicholas could understand perfectly, as if it was speaking his own language.
It's a boy, Noosh.
Said the other.
A boy? But he's taller than you, Grandpapa. That's because he's a special kind of boy. He's human.
The deeper voice said, carefully. There was a gasp.
No. It's perfectly safe, I'm sure. And even if it's not, we must never let fear be our guide. Look at his ears. Yes, human ears can take a lot getting used to. But what about what happened to? Come on, little Noosh. We mustn't think of that. We must always help those who are in trouble, even if they are human. He looks terrible. Yes, he does. That is why we must do everything we can, Noosh. Is it working? Yes.
A degree of worry rose up in his voice.
I believe it is. And on the reindeer, too.
Blitzen woke and slowly rolled over, taking his weight off Nicholas, whose eyes were now blinking awake. Nicholas gasped. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he saw the two creatures and gasped again, because that is what you do if you see elves. The elves were both quite short, as elves tend to be, although one was taller than the other. Nicholas could see the smaller one was a girl elf. She had black hair and skin whiter than the snow, and sharp cheeks and pointed ears, and large eyes slightly too far apart. She was wearing a green-brown tunic that didn't look very warm. She didn't seem to be cold. The older and bigger of the elves was wearing a similar colored tunic and a red belt. He had a long white mustache and white hair and a serious but kind look about him. His eyes twinkled like morning frost in sunshine.
Who are you?
Asked Nicholas, but really he meant what rather than who,
I'm Little Noosh.
said little Noosh.
What's your name? I'm Nicholas.
And I am Father Topo, Noosh's grandpapa.
Said the other elf, who was looking around him to see if anyone was watching.
Well, great, 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 great grandpapa. If we're being specific, we are elves.
Elves,
Am I dead?
asked Nicholas, which was a bit of a silly question, as for the first time in weeks he could feel warmth flooding through his veins and excitement rising in his chest.
No, you are not dead.
Said Father Topo.
Despite your best efforts, you are very much alive, thanks to the goodness we found inside you.
Nicholas was confused.
But I don't feel cold or weak. Grandpapa worked a little magic.
Said little Noose.
Magic? A little Drimwick. Drimwick? What's that?
Little Noose looked at Nicholas and then at her grandpa and back at Nicholas again.
You don't know what a Drimwick is?
She said. Father Topo looked down at the little girl elf.
He's from the other side of the mountain. There's not much magic where humans come from.
He smiled at Nicholas and said,
A Drimwick is a hope spell. You just close your eyes and wish for something to happen. And if your wish is just the right kind of way, you can make it happen. It's one of the earliest spells laid out in the Book of Hope and Wonder. That's an elf book about magic. I put my hand on you and your reindeer friend, and I wish you to be warm and to be strong and to be always safe.
Always safe?
said Nicholas, confused as Blitten licked his ear.
That's impossible.
Little Noose gasped as Father Topo covered her ears.
Elves never ever say that word.
He shook his head.
An impossibility is just a possibility you don't understand yet. But now you must leave Elfhelm.
Said Father Topo.
And you must leave quickly.
Elfhelm? The elf village?
Asked Nicholas.
But I'm not even there.
Little Noose laughed a long elf laugh, which is very long indeed. Father Topo gave her a stern look.
What's so funny?
Asked Nicholas, thinking that even if you had saved someone's life, it was still rather rude to laugh at them.
Standing on the street of seven curves.
Giggled Little Noose.
What? This isn't a street. It's the middle of nowhere. There's just snow and sort of colors.
Little Noose looked at Father Topo.
Tell him, Grandpapa. Tell him.
Father Topo looked around to check that no one was watching and quickly explained.
This is the longer street in Elfhelm. We are in the southeastern corner of the village. The street winds westward all the way to the wooded hills beyond the fringes of the village.
Wooded hills?
Asked Nicholas.
But I can't see anything. Just colors in the air. And over there, a silver lake and the reindeer field and all the shops on Reindeer Field Street.
Said Little Noose, jumping up and down and pointing.
Lake? What lake? And there's Elfhelm's Village Hall.
Little Noose said, pointing to nothing in particular. Nicholas didn't understand. He stood up.
What are you talking about? Is he blind?
Asked Little Noose. Father Topo looked at Nicholas, then at Little Noose. Very quietly, he said,
To see something, you have to believe in it. Really believe. That's the first elf rule. You can't see something you don't believe in. Now try your hardest and see if you can see what you have been looking for.
The Elf Village.
oh, sorry. There we go. Nicholas looked around him. Slowly, the hundreds of colors floating in the air became less ghostly and more real, more intense and vivid and solid. Nicholas watched as the colors that had before been floating as free as gas in the air formed themselves into lines and shapes. Squares, triangles, rectangles, roads, buildings, a whole village, appearing out of air. The elf village, he was standing on a street full of small green cabins. There was another road, a bigger one, cutting into it. Nicholas looked down at the ground. There was still snow that hadn't changed. He cast his eyes along the wider road heading north in front of him. On each side of the road stood buildings. Timber framed the snow-covered roofs. Nicholas saw that one of the buildings had a giant wooden clog hanging outside it. Another had a little spinning top painted onto a sign. A toy shop, maybe. Beyond that was a lake Little Noose had told him about, like a large oval mirror, which was right next to a field full of reindeer. Blitzen had noticed this too and was looking over with interest. To the west, before the wooden hills, was a large round dark tower pointing to the sky. Directly to the north was a place that Little Noose had been pointing toward, Elfhelm Village Hall, made of dark, almost black timber. It was by far the largest building in the whole village, not as tall as the tower. It was only 2 stories high, but wide and with around 20 windows, which glowed with light. Nicholas could hear singing, and the smell of something sweet and wonderful was wafting from the direction of the hall. Something he hadn't smelt in over a year, gingerbread. If anything, it smelt even better than it had outside the baker's shop in Christiani Capukinga. Yeah.
Wow. Elfhelm. My father was right. It's just how he described it. I like your hat.
Said Loose,
Thanks.
said Nicholas. He took the hat off and looked at it.
It's my father's hat. He was on an expedition to Elfhelm. I wanted to know if he had made it. He was with 6 other men. He was called...
But Little Noose was still focused on the hat.
Red is my favorite color. After green and yellow. I like every color. Really? Except purple. Purple makes me feel sad thoughts. That's where we live.
She told him. She pointed toward a red and green cabin a small way in the distance.
It's wonderful.
Said Nicholas.
But I also wondered if you'd seen a mouse. Yes.
Shouted Little Noose. Father Topo quickly covered his mouth with his hand.
Okay, human child, you've seen Elfhelm. Now you had better take your reindeer and go.
Said Father Topo.
Whatever you expect to find won't be here.
Blitzen nudged Nicholas's shoulder as if he understood the new urgency in Father Topo's voice, but Nicholas stayed where he was.
I came to find my father.
He said.
I've traveled 1,000 miles. Blitzen, Micah, and I are not just going to turn around and go back.
The old elf shook his head.
I'm sorry. It's not wise for a human to be here. You must go back south. I'm sorry. It's for your own good.
Nicholas looked into Father Topo's eyes and pleaded.
My father is all I've got. I need to know if he made it to Elfhelm. He could be our pet.
Suggested Little Noose. Father Topo patted the elf girl on the head.
I don't think humans like to be pets, Little Noosh.
Please, I come here peacefully. I just want to know what happened to my father.
Father Topo considered.
I suppose, given this season, there might be a chance you could be welcomed.
This excited Little Noose.
Let's take him to the hall. I won't cause any trouble. I promise.
Said Nicholas. Father Topo gave a quick glance over to the tall circular tower in the west.
Trouble doesn't always have to be caused. It's sometimes already there.
Nicholas had no idea what this meant, but he followed the elves as they walked in their clogs toward the wooden hall. They headed down the broad shopping street with a sign that declared simply,
The main path.
passing the clog shop, a bakery with smoke-stained windows, and a twin sleigh shop with a poster advertising lessons at the School of Sleighcraft. They also passed a crooked black-tiled building with windows made of ice.
The Daily Snow.
Read the sign outside.
The main elf newspaper.
Exclaimed Father Topo.
Full of fear and nonsense.
There were free copies of the newspaper. High outside.
Little Kip's still missing.
Was the headline, and Nicholas wondered who little Kip was. He was about to ask, but though they were small, the elves were fast walkers, and they were already some way ahead. He and Blitzen were struggling to keep up.
What's that building?
He asked.
The tall tower.
Look,
Said Father Topo, changing the subject.
that's the North Pole.
He pointed at a thin green rod sticking out of the ground. Little Noose spoke up.
Do you think Father Vodol will be kind?
I think it'll be all right.
Said the old elf.
Come on, Little Noosh. We elves are kind and welcoming in our hearts. Well, we always used to be, before you were born. Even Father Verdole knows that.
Nicholas was confused.
Father Tipo?
Topo.
The old elf corrected him.
Father Topo, sorry. I just wanted to ask if... Here you are, Blitzen.
Exclaimed Little Noose. They had reached the clear, icy lake. Just beyond it lay an open field where 7 other reindeer were happily chewing. Was it lichen? Lichen.
Yeah, I think so.
Lichen from the trees.
Do you know if my father...
Father Topo ignored him and called out to the reindeer.
Oh, dearlings, come here. Here's a new friend.
Meanwhile, Little Noose was back to talking about his favorite colors.
I quite like indigo. It's much nicer than purple. And crimson and turquoise and magenta.
Blitzen stood behind Nicholas and nuzzled his shoulder.
He's a bit antisocial.
Nicholas explained to Father Topo. But one of the reindeer, a female, came over and gave Blitzen the gift of some grass. For a moment, Nicholas thought he saw her feet actually leave the ground. A gap between where the reindeer's body ended and where the shadow began. But maybe he had just imagined that.
Ah, that's Donner,
Said Little Noose.
the kindest of all.
Little Noose started pointing at all the other reindeer.
And there's Comet with the white streak on his back, and Prancer, he's so funny, skipping with Cupid. Cupid will lick your hand off if you let him. Oh, and the dark one, that's old Vixen. She's a bit of a grumpy thing. And that one is Dancer and Dasher, who is the fastest of the lot. Are you okay, boy?
Nicholas asked Blitzen, but Blitzen was already off making friends. Nicholas noticed that the wound on Blitzen's leg had totally healed. Once Blitzen was grazing contentedly, they walked on past a post pointing west to the
Wooded hills where the pixies live.
The music got louder, the scent of gingerbread stronger, and the sense of fear mixed with a strange excitement until they had reached the door of the old village hall.
Oh, and you know what day it is, don't you?
Said Father Topo with a nervous smile.
No, I don't even know the month.
It's the 23rd of December. 2 days till Christmas. This is our Christmas party. The only party we're allowed now. But it's not as good as it used to be because dancing has been banned.
Nicholas couldn't believe he had been away that long. But there were even harder things to believe, as he was about to find out.
Our first chapter on Monday, The Mystery of Little Kip, 3, 4, 5. It's like 9 pages. So save it for Monday, correct?
Sounds good.
All right. See you in 10.
Yes, see ya in just a couple minutes. Okay, can you turn that off for me, Christian?